Okay. I'm starting the recording and I'm going to share the screen and we're ready to go. Yeah? Everyone's okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So everyone see the screen okay?
Yes.
Now. Yeah.
Okay. So guys, I thought I would talk a little bit about fevers today. And the reason I wanted to talk about fevers in the middle of summer is so that you're mentally prepared for wintertime when people seem to get flus and coughs and colds and so on. And let me just see, do I need to mute everybody? I don't think I need to mute everybody. Just mute yourself if there's shuffling going on around you, yeah? And so, oopsie, giving it away, okay. So wanted to talk a little bit about fever simply because people panic. If you feel chilly, if you feel your bones are hurting in winter, you panic. And the first thing that we reach for is Tylenol. How many people have reached for Tylenols at the first sign of fever for their child or for themselves?
Never, never.
Never, never. Good for you. Good for you. That's the smart thing to do. And there's a reason for that. And I think I'm gonna
and the power button at the same time.
And not putting critical letters. Exactly.
guys, can you mute yourselves? If you could mute yourselves, that would be great. So then we won't hear all the shuffling, etc., and talking. Okay, perfect, perfect. Okay, so here we go. Homeopathy and fevers. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about a Sugimura study. And the Sugimura study was actually a guy by the name of Dr. Sugimura, who was a researcher and a doctor at Fujimoto Children's Hospital in Japan. And what he did was he looked at 208 outpatients whose ages ranged from 6 months to 15 years with a high fever that they got due to a bacterial infection, who had been examined at the Fujimoto Children's Hospital between March and May of 1992. So that was sort of their flu season, getting sick season. And what he found was very, very interesting. And what he found was that all of these patients, aged 6 months to 15 years, were all sick. They all had about the same level of fever, which was about 38.7 degrees to 38.8. So within a half degree difference, they were hot fevers that were about the same. And yet about half of them went on to develop pneumonia. About half of these patients, so out of the 208 patients, 101 developed pneumonia. Okay, and about 107 did not develop pneumonia. And so this guy was curious and he went back and he said, why did some of these people develop pneumonia and why did some of these children did not develop pneumonia? And he found that the biggest factor in the pneumonia patients was that they had high doses of paracetamol, high doses of fever reducer, high doses of Tylenol. And the difference was stark between the people who took multiple doses of paracetamol or who took none or very few doses. And so the point I'm trying to make is you get a fever, you want to let the fever run as much as possible. If you don't want to let it run, you definitely do not want to take a Tylenol or an ibuprofen because that has an enormous chance of landing you in hospital with pneumonia. And what happens when you get pneumonia in hospital? You are forced to take antibiotics. Antibiotics are very hepatotoxic. These are not small-time antibiotics. They're pretty strong antibiotics. So you're damaging your liver, you're damaging, inflaming your gut lining, and you're destroying the villi of your intestines. So one decision that you took because of a flu or a fever to take a paracetamol, to take a fever reducer, now lands you with antibiotics in a hospital where you're admitted with a bacterial infection. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Once you land in hospital, you're much more subject to hospital infections. You're much more subject to things like COVID. A lot of the people that got COVID in New York were actually people with severe anxiety and who couldn't breathe because of their anxiety. They landed in the COVID hallways or the COVID ICUs, and they got COVID in hospital. So hospitals are not benign places. And the way to take yourselves out of that equation is to not use drugs that suppress fever. Anytime you suppress a fever, you're going to land up with a bigger chance of getting a much more exaggerated infection. And that was the Sugimura study. And so in Japan, they don't recommend fever reducers for children at all. And we're going to talk about homeopathic remedies that are gentle, that are powerful, that are effective. The only problem here is panic. And the purpose of this presentation is to not have you panic, but to be very, very calm when you have a fever. Because fevers are very, very therapeutic. When you have a high fever, your immune system is in good shape. You're doing things, your body is doing things that are ejecting the virus or the bacterium that you have. So a fever is a sign of good health. A fever is not a sign of bad health. And so what you want to do is avoid this antibiotic track. And then when your gut is wiped out in hospital from the antibiotics, what is the next step that happens? I see a lot of people who become psychotic over time. Their gut bacteria are completely wiped out, and there's a vital gut-brain connection. We're giving per person 8 antibiotics per year in many of these children, many of the little children, many of the elderly, and they're recklessly and randomly prescribed. And what that's doing is it's causing an epidemic of depression, psychosis, and so on. So there's a big gut-brain connection that you want to be aware of. If anyone tells you in a fever to eat ibuprofen or Tylenol, quote the Sugimura study, which discovered that there were substantially higher rates of hospitalization in people that are prescribed paracetamols or fever reducers. And we have this habit, if a child is vaccinated, the doctor says, oh, just take a Tylenol. If you have 100 degrees fever, they say, oh, just take a Tylenol. It comes with huge consequences. So what's the best solution? The best solution is actually not homeopathy. The best solution is to eat well so that you don't get sick. The best solution is not to have stress in your life. The best solution is to go for a walk every day. Get sunshine, drink good water. Don't drink this chlorinated water, fluoridated water. Drink good water. At the first sign of illness, or constantly actually, drink chicken soup and turmeric and garlic and onions and high mineral rich foods that help you avoid these illnesses. The second solution, if it's not a big deal, is to just do nothing. You just say, okay, this is nature or God or, you know, the gods of disease telling me, Sushima or whoever, you're overdoing it. Sunshine, you're overdoing it, just rest. Be parasympathetic. One of the biggest causes of disease is stress. And so stress not, do nothing, rest a lot, eat well, and get someone to help you when you're not well, because you're not gonna eat nourishing foods by yourself. Or prepare for them in advance. Keep some soups in the freezer and just thaw them and drink them. Drink cod liver oil, drink some raw milk, eat some butter, eat a couple of eggs. So eat good foods. And then if you feel that you're at risk, if you feel things are not going well, and actually even as a prophylaxis, homeopathy is wonderful. Homeopathy is not drugs. So that's one thing that you want to remember when you take homeopathy, you're not taking a drug. you're gently nudging your body's immune system. Please interrupt me if you have questions, guys. You're gently nudging your body's immune system to increase its defenses, to become hypervigilant, and to help you increase your vital force to cure that disease yourself. And so what we're going to talk about is when you get a fever, what should you look for? So when you get a flu or when you get a fever, always look for the exciting factors. Was it winter? Was it a summer flu? Was it cold, wet exposure? Were you in a very, very hot place? You were sweating, and then you went into an air-conditioned place, and all of a sudden you got sick. So these are the exciting factors that homeopathy uses to determine what sort of remedy will work for you. Was it rainy weather? Was it exposure to cold? Was it hot and then air conditioning? Was it cold, wet weather? Did you get a fever or cold after eating ice cream? There's even a remedy for that. That's pulsatilla. Did you have mental trauma? Did your child have physical trauma? Did you get food poison? Did you eat bad food at the cafeteria? Were you exhausted from too many sleepless nights? So these are the exciting factors. And what this is going to help you do is when you get a fever, you're going to stop panicking. You're going to stop panicking. You're going to look at this slideshow and you're going to look at this slide, which is slide number 3 or 4, I think. And you're going to say, which are my exciting factors? And then you will start looking at the remedies you have. So we're going to look at a few remedies today. And the first remedy is for very sudden flus, coughs, colds, chills, fevers, exposure to dry, cold weather. You go for a walk, it was icy cold, you realize you should have worn a jacket and you did not. And now you have a cold coming and a chill passing through your body in waves. You have coldness alternating with heat, you have very high fever. You've got dry, burning heat in your eyelids, nose, mouth, throat, lungs, and palms. You have very violent thirst. So there are 2 remedies that are violent here. One is aconite and one is belladonna. So remember the 2 violent remedies, aconite, belladonna. Aconite happens with a cold shock. If you have sudden trauma, you saw someone dying and you developed a cold, your car just died on the highway and you're shocked and you have to walk back, that's shock, folks, that's shock. Immediately take an aconite. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait to feel sick. Exposure to cold, dry weather, you'll have intense burning thirst, okay? And your symptoms are acute, violent, and painful. The thirst in aconite is very violent, but the second remedy, that's belladonna, which is also violent, has no thirst. So remember that difference. Aconite, there's violent thirst. Belladonna, there's no thirst, okay? Aconite, the symptoms are violent, and it is sudden onset. So within the first 24 hours of a sudden onset, anything, take an aconite. If you break a bone, take an aconite. You're in trauma, you're in shock, your wrist hurts, or your toe, like when I broke my toe, I took an aconite and it really helped, in addition to the arnica. So that's aconite at the beginning of a fever. And folks, what this is gonna do is it's gonna keep you out of hospitals. Once you're out of a hospital, you're not gonna get antibiotics. You're not gonna get hospital infections. You're not gonna get intubated. I see too many people who go into hospital with a urinary infection and come out 2 months later with all sorts of attendant problems. Did you wanna say something, Margaret? You need to unmute. You need to unmute. Can you unmute?
Yeah, are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just remembering that's what happened to Ralph.
Tell us what happened.
Yes, he had a violent fever and we tried nursing him at home until he got very, very sick, but he developed blood poisoning from a urinary tract infection.
Mm-hmm.
And then he got worse. So
I see.
was a long time in the hospital and rehab.
Okay, so everybody needs to have pyrogenium in their stash. Pyrogenium, 1M, 1 million for blood poisoning, exactly like this. So you take aconitum. If you feel you have severe infections of some sort, urinary tract or what have you, there's burning in your urethra and so on, take a pyrogenium 1M. It'll prevent sepsis. It'll prevent infection in your organs or blood poisoning. Very important remedy. So the first thing you do when you have anything acute is you take an aconitum, and then any of the other symptoms as they follow, you take different remedies. But if you feel that you have other infections that are very suddenly and violently intense, there's nothing as wonderful as pyrogenium. And let me tell you the story of a person that I know. Her sister got sepsis, and Kaiser did not diagnose it in time. This is a 27-year-old who passed away from blood infection. If she had had pyrogenium at home, she could have saved her life. So very, very important. And so you're paying $10 for these remedies, but these are insurances against far greater harm. Okay, so now you had fever of maybe 100, 9900, for which you don't really need belladonna. But if you have very high fever, like 103, 104, you have no thirst. So there's no thirst. You have internal coldness with external burning. You have a very hot head. Your pupils are dilated, red. There's redness in you. It's a nervous system disorder. You're twitching. You are scared. You're bright red. Your eyes are red and glossy. Your pupils are dilated. And you have a sudden violent attack, and you're not thirsty. When that's the case, violent fevers accompanied by no thirst, dry heat, bright red is belladonna. And when you hit the simillimum, folks, it'll be like magical and miraculous. When my grandson was sick, this worked beautifully. And it's instant, it's instantaneous. And this is not really suppressing your fever. It is working with a simillimum. So basically you're giving your body something that actually causes those symptoms to cure that from its root. And that's what's going on. The third type of fever is a ferrum Foss fever. And this is the very initial stage. So you come home and you don't want to tell, Ralph comes home, he doesn't want to tell Margaret that he's not feeling too good. He has a slight chill, but he's not really feverish, that feverish. It's like a 9900-degree fever. It's in the initial stages. There may be bloody discharges. It's low-grade fever, and you're just feeling tired. You have easy flushing. Your tongue is a little bit coated, and it's somewhere between belladonna and aconitum. That is ferrum Foss. Ferrum Foss, you can use a cell salt. You can use 30C. You have a chill with a desire to stretch at 1 p.m. You have continued sort of fevers. You have an infection, that's a low-grade infection, and frequently it will lead to sepsis if the infection continues, but you can abort it with a ferrum Foss. It's a hemorrhagic fever. In hemorrhagic fevers, you give ferrum Foss. Measles, where you go red, easy flushing, but it's mild. It's milder than a belladonna, which is 103, 104. It is not as violent as an aconite. It is just a slow growing malaise with a lot of redness. It's got venous congestion, okay? You're not drowsy at all. Drowsy is gelsemium. And so right now it might feel as though it's a lot of stuff to remember, but if you have these 6 or 7 remedies, you will have no troubles giving them to yourself and getting well really soon. The next remedy is gelsemium. There are some people who have this illness coming on slowly. They have heavy limbs and a heavy body. If you look at your spouse or your partner or your friend and you see that their eyelids, see my eyelids are drooping. If their eyelids are drooping, it's relatively slow to develop. You're thirstless. Gelsemium is also thirstless. Does anyone remember what the other thirstless remedy was?
Belladonna.
Yep, you got it. So belladonna is thirstless, but it is violent.
433 is unavailable.
Okay, gelsemium is not thirsty, but it is not violent. It is slow to develop. You have dullness of the head. You might see your spouse's tongue trembling. And if you ask them a question, they might be garbled replies. They want to remain in bed. This is actually a good starting remedy for children's infections like measles. Your limbs and your body feel very heavy. There's aching, tiredness, heaviness, weakness, soreness, especially in the muscles of your extremities. You're confused, you're dazed, you're apathetic, you have a chill with aching and a lot of languor. That means, just a desire to lay about and do nothing. You have cold hands and feet. Heat, there's a great deal of drowsiness. You don't want to get out of bed. And thirst is absent. Remember, if there's great drowsiness, a lack of desire to have any emotion whatsoever, but if there's thirst, if you're feeling violently thirsty, then it's not gelsemium, then it's bryonia. And we're going to go to bryonia next. But gelsemium fevers are slow, ponderous, heaviness of limbs, heaviness of eyelids. I mean, it's a classic. If you administer gelsemium for this kind of a fever, the fever will abort itself in a couple of days, a day or two at most. So what homeopathy is doing is it's keeping that flu from running to 8-10 days. It's not that you will not have the flu. It will abort it. It will shorten the duration. It might abort it, and it'll keep the acuteness. It'll keep the complications from developing. And that's all you need in life. That's all you need in life.
Sushma, a brief question about gelsemium.
Yes.
I understand it's used in fevers, or if a fever occurs. Is it also useful when there isn't a fever, but some of the same symptoms occur?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So today we're talking about fever only, and these are the remedies, but gelsemium is used for palsies, for paralysis, when your legs are heavy and they feel like lead. And, women during their menses will frequently have very heavy legs. Or you've had the trauma of a long-term disease, like if you've had the whooping cough or some other disease for a long, long time, you're weak, and gelsemium is the solution. And you have to see these symptoms, if do you have thirst or do you not have thirst? Are your lids droopy? It's a good idea to have someone else tell you that. Frequently, you can't tell for yourself. So the point of this is you are 11 people on this call, and keep a buddy telephone list and tell your buddy, hey, I'm having these issues. And your buddy who's been on this call will know what to administer to you. Frequently, when I'm sick, I'm just out of it. I cannot process. And that's when it's very important to either look at your cheat sheet, ask your partner, ask your buddy group to see what you should do, or to email me, text me, call me.
I can attest to the gelsemium. It works.
Oh, okay, who's that? Mirabai?
Yes.
Hey, talk about it. How does the gelsemium work for you? Tell us.
Because exactly that, heavy limbs like lead, couldn't get out of bed, couldn't think straight, couldn't keep my eyes open, especially bright light, going outside, but I had to go back to work. Mm-hmm. So I had to push through it. But that's when you did suggest gelsemium, also from your talks, when you mentioned it, that lethargy, heaviness, all of that rang a bell, and I made a water dose. Mm-hmm. And I think I don't need it right now, but it helped me get past all that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And let me tell you about the intuition of Mirabai. She got this she started taking gelsemium before you even spoke with me. And so right. It is your intuition, your knowledge, and that's what you're developing, because in a situation like this, you should be quickly able to say, is it an aconite flu? Is it a gelsemium flu, or a fever or a condition? Is it belladonna? and just take it, and you can't go wrong. You can't go wrong. All right, the next remedy is bryonia. And
If I have a
bryonia, hi, yes?
If I may interrupt just briefly, if you take, or if I take the so-called wrong remedy,
Mhm.
what would be the reflection or the symptoms that I might experience?
The worst thing that'll happen is nothing.
Hmm.
And the best thing that'll happen is you'll almost feel like a tingle. That's how I feel when you have a simillimum, which is you hit the nail on the head. You almost feel this bodily tingle, and things start to feel better. You feel better. You fall asleep like a baby. Frequently, people who are sick and they take the right remedy will fall asleep in like about 5-10 minutes like babies. When Richard and Jim had a great deal of grief after their dad passed, anxiety, fear, they were just terrified, and they were very, very sad. I gave them each an Aconite 200, and it was incredible for me to witness these two people who hate sleeping, can't sleep, don't sleep much, sleep very little. In about a few minutes, both of them went off to their rooms and took naps, and they woke up restored. So when the remedy is right, you'll hit the simillimum. When the remedy is wrong, nothing will happen. So give it a few doses. If nothing happens, try again. But don't panic. Don't panic. Bryonia is the person, and Richard is a classic. So I got to tell you a tale. When we were in Malaysia, he came to Malaysia. Heat really bothers him. He cannot stand heat, and he immediately developed a fever. And he was so quiet. He lay in bed and he pulled a blanket over his head. I didn't hear a single movement out of him, and I was so terrified. I took a mirror and held it under his nose to see if he was breathing or not. He was breathing, and he came out of his stupor long enough to say, "I'm alive, don't bother me." And that is a bryonia. That is a bryonia. The patient is worse with any motion. They don't want attention. They want to be left alone. They're just saying, just leave me alone. Don't ask me questions. Don't offer me water. I just want to have the blanket over my head, and I want to lie down. If they try to get up, they feel dizzy. Any kind of motion and exertion makes them very, very dizzy. They don't feel good. Okay, so they feel worse from motion, from rising up, from stooping, coughing, any kind of exertion, even breathing, deep breathing hurts them. They become very, very hot. These are people who are not chilly. You know, people in your life who put on, you know, who just want to be covered up. These are people who get hot very easily. So they don't want a blanket, they want a thin sheet. They become hot in a room. They become hot very quickly, and they become very annoyed if you try to hug and kiss and touch and do things for them. This is the opposite of a pulsatilla who wants hugging and kissing and touching, and they're whining, "Oh, mommy, hold me." That's a pulsatilla. A bryonia is a person who just wants to be left alone. They are very thirsty for large quantities of water infrequently. So if you're in a bryonia state, you want water. If you're thirstless, you're not a bryonia, guys. You're either a Belladonna or you're Gelsemium or something else, but if you're thirsty for large quantities of water, you are a bryonia. You're worse for touch, but you're better with heart pressure. So you know how sometimes when you do that, it really bothers people. But if you press hard, they love it. Bryonia loves hard pressure. Bryonia does not like feather touch because that gives them formication. Formication means their skin is very tingly and very sensitive to touch, but hard pressure is okay. The bryonia, flu or cold or illness develops very slowly over a few days. So you'll find you come home one day, you tell your partner or friend, "Hey, you know, I don't want to watch TV, my favorite TV show, or I don't really feel like reading a book. I'm just going to take a nap." The next day, they feel a little bit worse. The next day, so it comes on a little bit slowly compared to aconitum and belladonna, which are sudden onset and violent. So frequently, middle-aged to older people, they have bryonia diseases or illnesses, and the very young tend to have more violent disease or violent illness, where one minute they're running around, in a water fountain, and the next minute they have 104 fever. That's what my grandson's like, or what my children used to be like when they were young. But bryonia is the opposite. They're unwilling to talk, unwilling to move. They desire to be alone. And they get very irritated if you don't leave them alone. They're also constipated. So if you have diarrhea, you're not bryonia. Bryonia, constipated. But in the later stages, you might have diarrhea, but largely constipated. So you get a chill with a hot head, red face, worse warm room, dry burning heat, and worse with all of the symptoms is if there's any motion. The blood seems hot, and you have painful continued fevers, and your sweat is sour and oily. So you with me on bryonia? All right. Gelsemium is not thirsty, dull, heavy, heavy, heavy. Ferrum Foss in the initial stages of an illness, low-grade fevers, red. There's redness, there's flushing, there's bloody discharges. You might have some bacterial infection. That's low-grade, not high. That's Ferrum Foss. Violent, all of a sudden you develop no thirst, 103 fever, Belladonna. Belladonna, beautiful lady, deadly nightshade. Aconitum is when it's a very violent fever and you have intense thirst, and it happens from a shock of a sort to your system. So aconitum violent, belladonna violent, Ferrum Foss, low-grade fever, low malaise, redness, gelsemium heavy, 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 dull. You don't want to get out of bed. Bryonia, the same thing, but the least motion aggravates. You're constipated and you drink a lot of water.
I have a question, Sushama.
Yeah.
What is that word that you're using? Pulsatilla?
Yes, pulsatilla. When you want to be mollycoddled, coddled, picked, hugged, that's another remedy, and I should have added that. I forgot.
Okay. How do you spell that?
Pulsatilla.
Just like it sounds. Okay, then.
Yeah, just like it sounds. And the pulsatilla person, typically women, tend to be more pulsatilla, or a child just wants attention. They're like, Mommy, my skin is, I've got this thing on my fingernail. I want to be hugged. And so that's when I am sick, I want that kind of attention. And Richard's trying not to give me attention because he's judging it by himself. So I have to tell him, no, come meet with me. Come sit here with me. Talk with me. That's possible.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Just a brief question, and it's part of, for me, the learning process. I understand as you're presenting things, and it's almost like learning another language.
Yes.
I understand the words, but rather than having these experiences of fevers and so on, and then having to take something where I probably have a body sensation of what it is, I'm putting it mostly into my head. So it's an intellectual process. And I'm wondering if you have any clues or guidelines for how best to learn it, other than learning and reading it and memorizing it and so on.
Yes. So the next time the best thing to do is to, next time you're not feeling well, just quickly read through it, because once you right now, it's a whole gobbledygook bunch of words. But when you're ill or when you're sick, everything begins to make sense. You're like, oh, I was exposed to cold. That's right. I got wet, and then I came home, and then the house was really hot. Or I was outside and gardening, and I was sweating, and all of a sudden this chill wind came from the ocean, and I got chilled. So when you're exposed, so now you were wet from the sweat, and now you're exposed to cold. That is a rust tox. That's a rust tox cold. And so to answer your question, let us see. What's gonna help is for you to read this a few times, and then when the time comes, you just pick a remedy and do it. It is incredible. Mirabai just picked her remedy herself. And part of it is that the remedy speaks to you. Someone's got their phone going. The remedy speaks to you, and that's the best I can think of. And repetition always helps. So listen to this over and over again, and it'll get baked into your mind. Does that help?
Thank you, it does.
It's a lot, but on the left-hand side are the keynote symptoms. So if you even just remember the left-hand side, that's enough.
That's really helpful, Sushma.
Okay,
Yeah.
thanks. So rust talks, restless. This person is restless. They're worse exposing to wet, cold, air draft. When you are working in 100-degree weather, when you're in Florida, you're gardening in Florida, it's 100 degrees outside, and then you are so hot and sick, you go into air conditioning and it's 60 degrees. And before you know it, you've caught a cold or a fever. That's a rust tox. It is very sensitive to weather. Who is sensitive to weather here? Any of you sensitive to?
Yeah, me.
Okay, so rust tox might very well be the remedy for you. Very sensitive to change of weather. And what happens is when they rest, it hurts. Their joints hurt, their muscles hurt. When they're sleeping, their whole body kind of freezes over. And when they wake up and walk a little bit, things get better. That's rust tox. And in the course of a fever, it is 10 times more intense, where you were asleep during the night, all of a sudden you were seized with muscle and joint and bone pains, and you woke up and you're restless and you walk around and you feel a little bit better, but you still have a fever. When you wrap yourself in blankets, you feel better. You're worse when with wet and cold exposure. So folks, in many countries, winter is dry, or winter is snowy, or winter is wet. In California, winter is wet. So for us, rust tox is a great remedy because you get wet in the rain, it's cold, you come home and you catch a chill and your body is hurting.
Sushma, what is dengue?
Dengue fever. Dengue is a fever where you are very restless, your muscles and bones hurt. I had dengue fever when I was in Malaysia. I wish I had rust. Instead, they gave me ciprofloxacin, the worst antibiotic you can imagine, in my hospital drip, which made me sick for like 3 years afterwards. I could have used rust tox for dengue fever. You have muscular pain. You're worse when you have wet cold exposure. And the tip of your tongue is red. That's one of the keynotes. The tip of your tongue is red. When you are a belladonna, the front triangle of your tongue looks like a strawberry. You know how a strawberry has these little dots? Your tongue looks like a strawberry in the front. It's all red, bright red. Whereas here, you just have a red tip at your tongue. So worse continued to wet exposure to wet, cold, air drafts, chilled, when hot or sweaty, uncovering your head, etc. Beginning of motion, it's bad, but after you've been in motion for a little bit, it's better. Before storms, a lot of rust tox people get bad before storms. They can feel it in their bones. If you feel it in your bones, there's rust tox, and there's a wonderful remedy called rhododendron for storm-sensitive people. When the barometric pressure changes, when it goes from hot to cold, cold to hot, rainy to warm, rainy and wet to rainy and warm. Overexertion. You've been yanking out your rose plants, and you've dug and dug, and now you're sweating, and all of a sudden a breeze blows and you cool off. Or you have ice cold drinks. All of these can make you a rust tox fever. Rust tox is better with continued motion from heat. A hot bath makes these people better if they're already heated. Warm wrapping is good. Rubbing is good. Nosebleeds actually make them feel better. Holding their affected part or squeezing it makes it better. Abdomen, head, etc. Stretching their limbs, change of position. So anytime you exercise these frozen joints and you feel better, you're a rust tox. And it's not limited to fevers, folks. The reason I'm doing just fevers is you're biting off things you can chew off, because the materia medica is enormous, and people would get very stressed out if they didn't have smaller bites. So these remedies are good for a lot of other things, but if you have them on hand and if you get a fever, use these. Easily chilled, worse least uncovering with pain in limbs. You're chilled as if dashed with cold water in the veins. So you feel like you have cold water running through your veins, preceded by a cough, alternating with heat, chill in a single place. So your hand might feel chilled, or just your belly might feel chilled, and itching. Many people have severe itching during their fever. That is rust tox. Itching, muscle pains, joint pains, change of weather, cold to wet to hot, rust tox.
Sushma?
Yep.
Could I take rust tox just for my celiac itch and rash?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
How often?
When you get the itch. When you get the itch, take rust tox, and when it stops, stop.
Okay.
Alrighty. And then you might have conditions that are between rust tox and between bryonia. You see, bryonia is worse from any motion. It's constipated. Now you say you have neuromuscular issues which are like rust. You don't want to be touched. You don't want motion. You don't want to have any motion, but you don't have constipation. You actually have loose stools. That condition is Phytolacca, where you have a desire to lie down, but lying down aggravates. When you move, you feel better, but at the same time, you can't really move. You have great prostration. You have high fever alternating with chilliness, and you have night sweats, which are very acrid. And you're not constipated. Bryonia is constipated. So then in that case, Phytolacca is a wonderful, wonderful remedy. And that might be good for you, except that you have itching. So for itching, I would go with rust tox. There are many people who eat stuff outside and you get gastric symptoms. You ate poisoned fish or salmon or shellfish. When you have gastric symptoms, nausea or biliousness or vomiting, and you don't feel good in your belly, and you're very, very thirsty, you're violently thirsty, you have vomiting and nausea, diarrhea, you're in a foreign country, you're in Costa Rica and you just ate out and you've got all these things and you get this fever, you're grinding your teeth. And in that fever, if you become loquacious, if you talk a lot, my daughter once, when we were in India, she got this fever, and as the fever rose, she would start talking and she'd say, oh no, this is usually a very quiet kid. And she'd become very, very talkative and would say, oh my God, Katie, be quiet. She was a podophyllum. She was a podophyllum. Gastric symptoms, very thirsty, vomiting, nausea, probably food poisoning, very loquacious during the fever, and chill at 7 a.m., profuse sweat. May not be quite 7 a.m., but morning chill. That's a podophyllum. So these are the remedies, and we're just gonna go very swiftly through how to dose. What I would recommend is you always take the first dose, a dry dose. Take 1 or 2 pellets, hold them under your tongue. And then the next dose, put it in a glass jar, succuss it or stir it or bang it. You succuss like that. You go bang, 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 bang. Take a sip and take it as frequently as you need to feel better. I cannot tell you whether you should take it every 5 minutes or every 5 hours. But the goal is to take as less of it as possible in order to feel better. And you'll get a sense of it as you go along. And if you've taken 4 doses and you're feeling better, that means you hit the jackpot. You hit a good remedy. Then stop. Then you stop. If you start to feel worse again, take it again. If you start to feel better, stop. And tell your partner or buddy or spouse or whatever the same thing. If this happens, give me this. And you can even write things down with these fevers. You can say, if I have food poisoning, please give me podophyllum. If I have Rustox and bryonia, which is lying down aggravates, and I'm very restless, but I'm not constipated, and I have this rheumatic pain, but there's no itching or a different kind of itching, it's Phytolacca. If I have constipation, I'm restless, wet from cold exposure, I got a chill and a draft, and I was wet and dry, and there's a change of weather, and when I get up in the morning, I'm very stiff first, and then I start to get better, and I have bone and muscle pain, Rustox. Bryonia, when you want absolutely nobody to bug you when you're sick, and you drink water, you're thirsty. And what is the remedy for when you don't want anyone to bother you, but you're not thirsty? What is that remedy?
That's
Aconite.
That's gelsemium. That's gelsemium.
Gelsemium.
Oh,
Yeah.
gelsemium, yeah.
Yeah. Aconite is very thirsty. Belladonna is thirst less. Belladonna, you're very hot, but yet you're not thirsty. But you're not slow and low. Everything is very feverish, and you're very, very red. And that the same thing goes for pain as well. Bryonia pain comes on slowly, but it's deletable. It's incontrovertible. It just keeps going. A bryonia case keeps going. Gelsemium, it's this tiredness. It's this weakness in your muscles, this heaviness in your muscles, and you're very unthirsty. You're not thirsty at all. Ferrum Foss, you're drinking regularly, but it's in the initial stages of your illness, and you may well be able to abort it. Belladonna, very high fever, very suddenly. Typical onset is in very young children. Aconite, you just had a shock, and all sorts of things start to happen to you. The potency, I would say, start with the lowest. You could have a 930, 200, and 1,000,000, and know your family. There are some families that tend to get a certain type, or some people who tend to have certain types of fever. So for Richard, I would have a bryonia 9, a bryonia 30, and a bryonia 1M. If I had a child who was very prone to accidents and incidents and so on, I would have aconite in a 9, 30, 200, and 1,000,000. If I had someone who had mental trauma or physical trauma, I would use the aconitum. If it was someone who ran to very high fevers very suddenly, I would keep belladonna in a bunch of different potencies handy. And the first dose is a dry dose. The second, third, fourth dose are water doses. How do you take the water dose? You sip it, you hold it in your mouth for 5, to the count of 5 or 10, and then you swallow it. All you need to do is get it in sublingually. How do you make a water dose? You take a couple of pills, you put them in the water, you stir, stir, stir. It doesn't even have to be totally dissolved. You can start taking sips right away. And then one of the things that people feel is, oh my goodness, this fever, how can drinking this sip of water or this one silly little sugar pill do it? But it just works. It's just magical, because we're trying to cure like with like. You're trying to cure the disease with a low dose of a remedy that produces that exact same set of symptoms.
Sushma, could you say a word or two or more about the difference between the tablet or the dry tablet and the liquid? Why you use one first and then the other second, or what's the quality?
Yes. So the first time you take something, you don't know whether that's the right remedy or not.
Yeah.
You're just feeling very ill, and you want to sort of test it. So that's a dry dose. A wet dose is actually much better in that it enters your body faster, it's more effective, it goes deeper, and you're going to take multiple doses off it. And so you could take a wet dose right off the bat as well. But typically what I would say is, if the dry dose, 1 or 2 dry doses work, then you know you can make a wet dose and use that. You can also take just dry doses or just wet doses, but this is sort of the pattern you want to follow. It's much easier to take a wet dose with just sipping it by your bedside. For instance, a wet dose of Mag4. Karen, you there? Hold on. You're probably, yes, you are there. You are muted. No problem. So if you were to take a wet dose of Foss, for instance, you have it. You know, you don't have to keep popping pills. The other thing is, if you are diabetic, you don't want to eat 5 sugar pills, 5 sugar pills, 5 sugar pills, you know, 20 times a day. And so I would go with a wet dose later and a dry dose the first 2 or 3 times. And each time, oh yeah, that's the main reason I forgot. The wet doses, so that you're not taking the same exact potency every time. With a dry dose, you're just taking the same pill with the exact same potency. When you wet the dose and you go bang, bang, bang like this, when you succuss it, you're changing the potency, you're dynamizing it slightly, and that makes a huge difference in effectiveness. So every time you're taking, I don't know why my thing is not showing, but I am holding up a cup. Can you see me?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm holding up this cup, and if I go bang, 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 every time there's a slight change in potency, and it works better. And so wet dose is terrific. Just remember to wash your bowl or your jar afterwards very thoroughly through the dishwasher, because stuff gets stuck to it. And if you keep adding water to it, you're just diluting the remedy, and you might at a certain point in the future take that remedy accidentally, although nothing will happen, it won't kill you, but you don't want that.
Does it matter how much water you use when you make a wet dose?
Generally speaking, I would recommend 6 to 8 ounces for 2-3 pills, or 1 pill even, because they're so diluted. Just enough to tide you over your current week or so. And literally a dose is a sip or 2, a half a sip, you know, 5 drops. There are kids on the spectrum who have these doses of just 2 drops, and it has a pretty dramatic, makes a pretty dramatic difference.
Sushma, you had suggested hot water for the Foss. Is that true for all the other wet doses, or does it matter?
It is not true for the other wet doses, but we find that with Foss specifically, the hot dose is way more effective than the cold dose, through experience of various homeopaths.
And can you reheat the dose, or?
Yes, by convection heat, not by microwave. Yes. Folks, anything that you microwave, it'll lose its potency completely and instantaneously.
And Sushma,
Yeah.
if you have the water dose over the week, do you leave it out or do you put it in the fridge? Does it matter?
If you're living in a fairly nominal temperate climate, I would leave it on the counter. But I have kept some of my remedies in the fridge, simply because I use them over more than a week. So if you have a Banerjee protocol that you're doing, or if you're taking a remedy for 4 months, feel free, by all means, keep it in the refrigerator. Just make sure you dynamize it when you drink it. Each time, every single time. And as a matter of fact, if you're down to the last drop on your long-term remedy, say you're on a protocol for cataracts. Cataract protocol is Calcarb 200 and Belladonna 3C. And you mixed it together in a Banerjee protocol, and you're taking these sips twice a day. You reach the bottom of your remedy jar, you fill it to the top, you succuss it 40 times, and now you have a new potency. And what's then happening is the potency keeps increasing as time goes by. It is somewhat different than the previous potency, and it works a whole lot better. And that's called plussing. That's one thing you should know, and it's called plussing. So you start with it. So let's go through your average flu. Okay,
I mean, interrupting, but
Sure.
can you repeat the name of the first item, the first homeopathic for cataracts? I didn't get it.
oh, Calcarea carbonica.
Calcarea carbonica.
Yeah, yeah, and Belladonna 3C. That is a Banerjee protocol. You take it for a long time. I have a cataract, by the way. I was born with a cataract, so I'm taking it. All right, so any other questions? Okay, so let's start with your average flu. What's happened is summer's over, and now you're in winter season. It's kind of cold. You don't really feel like walking out in the cold, and it's raining anyway. And so you're kind of housebound, and you go out for a walk, you get exposure, and all of a sudden you come home and you develop raging fever. You're violently thirsty, and you immediately take an aconitum. You're going to want to take it in the first 24 hours. And after 24 hours, you dose pretty frequently. You have intense thirst, you're violently ill, you're violently thirsty, and you just got exposed to cold, dry winds. Or you had a shock, or you saw someone dying, or your best friend was ill, and then you got sick. That's aconite. So you take this aconite, a pill dose first, and then you take a few water doses. You feel either better or you feel worse. If you feel better, carry on taking it. But after about a day or so, you might find that your symptoms change. And all of a sudden, your face turns red. Your face turns red. Your fever, which seemed to have tamped down, is now 103, 104. When the symptoms change, then the condition has changed. And all of a sudden you go from very violent thirst to no thirst. That's belladonna. Okay, and then if you didn't have belladonna, if you didn't have aconite, what happened was you sort of went for a walk, and then you come back and you're not feeling so good. You don't feel like making dinner. You say, oh, honey, let's eat out. And you're kind of feeling weak. Take a ferrum Foss. Take 2 ferrum Fosses. Take 4 doses of ferrum Foss, and you might abort your illness. And you're feeling chills, but it's not showing up on a thermometer. That's low grade fever, low grade chills, initial stage ferrum Foss. Then you discover that you are very busy, you're not feeling good, or you're in an orchestra, you're the head of an orchestra, and you had huge responsibilities, and you had to go every night and go perform, and you come back on day 4th, you're just wiped out. You come home and you go, why did I do that? Why did I not take those days off? You're aching and tired, and you've already been sick or feeling under the weather for 3 or 4 days, and you have this muscle weakness, this soreness. You can barely function. You don't have the energy to put a pot of water to boil on the stove. That is Gelsemium. And you're thirstless. You're not thirsty. That's Gelsemium. And then or that's not the same person. Gelsemium is not the same person as Bryonia, probably. Then you have this guy who's been digging, and overdoing it. And then he has all sorts of things he's been doing, and cold, this, that, and the other. And all of a sudden, he doesn't feel so good, but he keeps going. He keeps going. And then on day 2 or 3, he just says, I'm calling it quits. I'm just gonna pull the sheet over my head. Don't bug me. I'm shutting this door. That's Bryonia. And and from time to time, he will holler for water. He doesn't want to be touched. He doesn't want you giving him the warm fuzzies. He just wants to be left alone. That's a Bryonia. And the people who get very, very cramped up during the night, especially in cold, wet weather, muscle cramping, bone cramping, that's rust tox, especially if it's accompanied by itches, and you feel better. You're restless and you really need to rest, but you feel better from motion, and you feel better from warmth. That is a rust tox. And when you have something that's between a rust tox and a Bryonia, some of the symptoms of Bryonia, some of the symptoms of rust tox, it's a Phytolacca for fibromuscular rheumatism. Phytolacca is an excellent remedy for women's stuff, glandular problems, breast nodules, inflammatory breast disease. It has cured many a cancer. And then the last thing is you go on a trip someplace, you get sick, and you start talking in your hotel room loudly, and you're very, very sick. Take a podophyllum, start with a dry dose, take a wet dose. The one thing I should remind you in a foreign country is find water that is not contaminated when you're taking a wet dose, or you may even be better off taking a dry dose.
Questions, Sushma, you mentioned a couple of times one or two, to take 1 or 2 tablets. Is there a difference, or is that just how much you can get out of the bottle, or what? How does that work?
Well, you can take as little as 1 of the poppy seed sized tablets. But because it's an ultra dilute dose, I mean, you think about this, they've taken this podophyllum, or they've taken aconitum, and taken 1 drop, added 99 drops of water to it, and then taken 1 drop of that and added. By the time you get to 30C, none of that substance is present. It's the succussing that gets you the power of that substance. So whether you put 1 pill or 5 pills, doesn't matter.
Thank you.
I mean, when you pop it open, sometimes 2 pop out, sometimes 1. You know, don't worry about it. Just do it. I have a hard time with the poppy-sized pellets. And our dogs have a hard time with the smaller pellets. They don't see them as good. So I like the mustard-sized ones. You have about 800 to a bottle. Let me get a bottle and show you what they look like. So if you can see that, I'm gonna stop sharing so I can see your faces and you can see my face. Can you see this?
Yes.
And can you see that or no?
Yes.
Okay, that's the mustard seed sized pellets. These are even tinier. These are from the kit. And this is what they look like. And I would recommend you don't use these because I have trouble seeing them. And you just pop them like this, like so. You tap them into this, put them under your tongue, and you're done. Boiron is a little bit bigger. Boiron is a little bit bigger. And so, any questions, any comments?
Just need to absorb it all.
Okay, and I'll send you the PowerPoint as well. You can put it on the refrigerator or put it in a file and refer to it, please, if you're sick. I'm going to stop the recording now.